Hello, welcome back to the studio. As you see, a nice golden snow scene for us to look at, inspired by the Bob Ross classic Reflections of Gold. But as you saw from the title, there's something very important I want to tell you about painting. About your painting, and about my painting. It's a secret though, so you have to watch right to the very end of the video. And at the end, I'll tell you what it is. That's if you haven't guessed already. So, sit back and relax, cups of tea, and let's paint this beautiful painting, yet to be named. Maybe you can think of something. Drop a comment down below. Happy painting, people.
So here's my canvas, 16 by 20. As you can see, I've painted it a different colour this time. Buff titanium, it's a Data Rowney colour, and I'm still going to be using Bob Ross liquid white oil paint. Now, you might be surprised, but even applying a thin, even coat of liquid white, that lovely golden colour grins through. In fact, it's the reason why I use this rather than a grey canvas. I want my whole painting to have a lovely warm glow. I apply a thin, even coat using an old Bob Ross landscape brush. And of course, I check it using my fingertips. As you can see, a nice clear fingerprint is what we're looking for. Not too much and not too little. I'll finish off covering the entire canvas. And as you can see, another fingerprint test just to make sure I've not overdone it. Make sure you rub out your fingerprints. Here's my palette, and I'm carrying on with that old 1-inch brush, but I did dry clean it before I got into my first colour, which is Indian Yellow. It's a transparent golden colour. I want this to be really a nice patch of gold from the right hand side, stretching sort of 2/3 of the way across my canvas. This painting wants to have a strong sense of light coming from the right hand edge. So I apply this quite thinly and start adding it to the horizon line. Next, I go into some cadmium yellow with a little touch of bright red. This produces a lovely warm orange colour. I used it on the same brush. I didn't bother dry cleaning it. I let this warm orange colour overlap into the edge of the Indian Yellow. I stand back occasionally. Yes, let's add a little more red. Whew. Wow, that's really bright. Too bright? Maybe. I'll knock some off on a paper towel and then blend it in. As you see, the liquid white helps these colours mix together on the canvas. I'll carry on blending. I don't want any hard lines or edges. Everything should look nice and seamless. My next colour is Prussian Blue, and for this I'm going to want a nice dry, clean brush. I'm going to add a small amount to the brush, work it well into the bristles, and start right in the corner of the canvas. If the colour's too strong, I can always dry clean my brush at this stage, but I think I'm okay. Take care though. As you head across the canvas, you might start to encounter some yellow and therefore some green. As you see, a little hint of it starts to come through, but I'm not too concerned about it. I quite like that little touch of green colour in my sky. I'll use that same brush and a touch of black. Once again, just a small amount, worked well into the bristles. I want to darken my sky a little more. Once again, I start in the corner. I think it might be too dark, but let's carry on and see what happens when it mixes with the blue. As you see, suddenly that green colour doesn't look half so bad. Darkening the edge of the canvas really helps to draw your eye to the right hand side of the painting. And as you see, as the painting progresses, that hint of green becomes quite a feature. For my next colour, I need a soft, clean brush. I'm going to go into some titanium white and start to indicate the glow in the background sky. This wants to be right on the edge for this painting. I blend gently and then use the brush and tap it just across the sky to indicate some nice sort of stringy thin clouds. You can add as many or as few as you like. Once you've tapped them on there, you can soften them by just brushing along the cloud. If you pick up some yellow colour, dry clean your brush. Now, let's mix up a nice background colour for some trees. Black, Prussian blue, touch of Van Dyke brown and some crimson. I want this to be sort of almost like a brownish tone. I mix it well, adding more Van Dyke brown as needed. I think I'm close to the colour I'm looking for. I've gone back to the blue brush that I used for my sky. Notice how I load the brush in one direction and just give the brush a nice firm tap to open the bristles. I'm going to put some soft background trees in, some darker ones and some lighter ones. You'll notice that I'm just tapping with the brush and letting it skid slightly. If I want these trees to look stronger and darker, I'll just add more paint to my brush. Here's a new angle for you. I want them to be no more than maybe a couple of inches tall at this stage. I'll add more as the paint progresses, and I want to cover my entire horizon line. Don't leave any gaps, and try not to cover up too much of those lovely bright clouds along the horizon line. I want to add a little detail to these background trees. I'm using my liner brush with some Van Dyke brown and a few drops of odorless thinners or linseed oil. These trees are a long way away and the detail wants to be nice and fine and not too dark. I want to add a small amount of highlight to some of these trees, so I've gone back to the 1-inch brush I used for the nice highlights in the sky. This time I'm touching into a little bit of Indian yellow and cadmium yellow, and you see, tapping out that brush very well, I want the bristles to be nicely splayed apart. Very gently, just touch the edges of these trees, bearing in mind where the light's coming from, strongly from the right, so you want the shadows to be on the left. I do some trees that are darker and leave the background trees for a nice little bit of infill. I add a little bit of liquid white to some of my colours just to get them a little brighter and to make the paint a little softer and easy to stick. But don't be tempted to add too many highlights. It's so easy to overdo it. So take regular stand backs from your painting. Look at it from the other side of the room. I'll add 1 or 2 more touches, but most importantly, save the dark. It's the dark that gives our painting depth and distance. My next colour is a nice soft lavender tone, a touch of Prussian blue and some alizarin crimson. I mix them well. Notice the colour change on my palette. It's one of the reasons why I like using a white paper palette. You can see the colour you're mixing. This is the colour I'm going to be using for the shadows on the snow. During the tea break, I moved the lavender over to the side and added some titanium white to it. I just want a very soft, pale lavender colour. And you can see here, all I've been doing is tidying up that lower edge of the bushes, grabbing a little of the shadow colour, the dark brown colour, and just teasing it out. Here you see I lay on a slightly brighter colour. I want just a little bit more of a contrast here and there. I don't want this snow to look particularly flat, so I vary my colours a little as I go. Now, one neat little trick is I can remove some of this blue paint and add some beams of light across the snow. That buff titanium colour comes grinning through for me, and this is where I can use a fan brush with a little bit of titanium white, some cadmium yellow and a little bit of Indian yellow, just a speck, and I can add some lovely bright zings of light across the snow. The lavender colour is very pale blue in tone, but if I'm careful I won't get any green. I decided to add some more of this lovely golden yellow orange tone to the midground of my painting. Now, let's start working on some midground trees as well. Again, I've gone back to my old 1-inch brush and I've gone back into my nice sort of chocolatey brown colour, and as you see, I'm just pushing into the paint here. I want to leave a little bit of a mark there. I want these trees to run from that shadow line to just above the background trees. And yes, I know, I'm going to have to sacrifice 1 or 2 of them. They were my favourites as well. But never mind, I can paint them again. Here you see, I'm just building up a nice series of layers of foliage on a background tree. Always tapping on the corner. Now, if this was very heavily painted in the background, I could always scrape that off with a palette knife. But today, I think I'm going to get away with it. I'll also add a few tree trunks, sticks and twigs in this mass of trees and bushes. They may not show in the finished painting, but at least I know they're there. I've picked up the 1-inch brush I use for highlighting background trees. Notice this time, instead of just tapping straight into the paint, I'm actually pushing the brush forward into the paint. I want to create a little line right in front of the bristles, favouring that right hand corner. Here you see the line of paint and the corner I favoured. Here's a nice close up of the brush, and as you can see, there's a real big thick heavy band of paint. Now favour that right hand corner and just gently touch the canvas. I want to leave an imprint at the edge of the brush, a little brighter on the right, a little more shadow in the centre and to the left. As I'm doing this, I'm sort of standing back occasionally and wondering if these highlights are delicate enough. They look a little bit sort of thick, they're sort of too chunky. Oh well, we'll see how they look a little later on in the painting. Just add a little variety to the colour. I've added a tiny touch of bright red to my mixture. As you can see, just a little fleck here and there, but don't overdo it. But I think my brush has started to get clogged, and that is the reason why I think I've got these slightly heavy, clumpy sort of highlights. So I dry clean my brush on a piece of paper towel and get it back in condition. I'll add a few more little highlights to these bushes here, and I think the brush is working a little better. Now, back to that blue brush. With careful brush strokes, I can just tease out a little bit of shadow colour for the base of these bushes. I'm flirting with the edge of that yellow, I know, but I think I get away with it. Sometimes you have to take a chance with your painting, and if things don't work out, well, you can always come back and fix them. My top tip is to live with them for a while before you make any big changes.
So here's my painting after a night of rest. And I really like the background sky, it looks lovely. I even like these background trees, they came out really well. Although I'm not sure about this angle here. My other half pointed out, but she said, "You've done another ski slope as usual." Another one of those little feelings of mine. But the one thing that does concern me most is this little bushing tree over here. It's not got that little delicate touch that I was looking for. I think I might have to take off some of these highlights. So let's work on that next. And by the way, my liquid white, well, it's still just about workable. But if it dries out through the course of today, I'll add a little more. So on with the painting.
So as you heard, I've decided to take away some of the highlighting on this tree and bush. I'm going to use the tip of my palette knife and just carefully pick off the bits that I don't want. I'll live with my painting a little longer before I make any other adjustments. Now, let's look at the other side of our painting. Once again, I've gone back into that dark chocolatey brown colour for the underpainting. And I want this to be a group of trees and bushes, but bigger than the ones on the right. Sometimes by adding another large dark element into a painting, it'll change the dynamics. And you'll suddenly think that the part of the painting over on the right, which well wasn't working out as well, suddenly looks better. You need balance when you're doing painting. I'm going to bring this down below the base level of the distant trees and bushes to bring it closer to me in the painting. Once again, use a strong dark colour for this. I'm going to be very careful not to get the slope to match the ones in the background. And I'm going to come back and fix that later on as well. To highlight these trees and bushes, I'm going to use this, and it's a half round brush. It has very long, soft bristles and a beautiful shape, perfect for doing delicate highlights. Once again, notice that I've added a little touch of liquid white to my palette. My yellow colours were a little on the stiff side. I think my paint is a little older and it has started to dry. Adding liquid white will soften it and make it just a little easier to get the highlights to stick. Notice how I press my brush into the paint, but keep the bristles open and lacy. Don't let them clog together. The paint wants to sit right on the tips of the bristles, and when you apply it to the painting, think about where the light's coming from. Strongly from the right again. And very delicate touch. No pressure. Do one little tree branch at a time, and don't be tempted to go too far before you stop and reload your brush. As I run out of paint, I'll do the shadow side, but top tip, touch off any of the dark colour before you reload with highlight. It'll keep your colours fresh and bright. If you enjoy my tutorials, don't forget to like and subscribe. It's all free. It doesn't cost anything, but it really helps my little channel to grow. If you want to go further, you can support the channel by buying me a coffee. I spend all the money on paint supplies. Thank you. I dry cleaned my blue fan brush and just teased back a little of the shadow. And I'll add a little touch of our blue lavender colour for the rest of the shadow. While I've got that brush in my hand, let's level out some of these sloped areas in the background. Just take a little bit of the base of some of these bushes and just level them off slightly. It gives a nice little tiered look. It doesn't take much to change the complete shape of a painting. I spent a few minutes fiddling and farting around with this background before I got into the Bravery test. I can't put it off any longer. Let's get into it. I think we want a nice big old tree, about here, 1/3 in from the edge of my canvas. It's a classic position, and I might do something with that little tree in the distance. No, here's where it's going to go. I load a filbert brush with some black and brown and just like that. Yes, another camera failure. I have to investigate this further. But here's an action replay. I put black and brown on my brush and drew a line down my canvas. I made it a little wider and put a few little bumps on it for branches. So you didn't really miss anything. Well, not much. My tree is a silver birch and needs some lovely bright highlights to indicate where the light is coming from. Once again, I use some titanium white with my Indian yellow, cad yellow and ochre mixtures with a little touch of red. It's a bit of a mishmash, but I really want some lovely bright colours. Now, if you struggle to do this, try putting on a few dabs of paint using the small blade of the knife first. Then switch to the large blade and just give it a light flick with a bit of a rounded stroke. You might find this is easier just to put the paint on the edge of the tree first. I'll go back to adding paint using the wide blade of my knife. I've gotten used to doing it over time. As you see, it's a very light touch. As soon as the knife starts to move, you want to be lifting off, but you can come back and have a play with it. For the left hand side in shadow, I pick up some of my lavender colour on the back edge of my knife, and again touch and then lift off almost immediately. Don't lose all the lovely dark colour. I'll put up some pictures of birch trees to give you an idea of the patterning. They could be very varied, stripes or blobs. You decide what you want. Now for some branches. For this I'm going to use a liner brush and a drop of linseed oil into some of the Van Dyke brown and black. Here you see a photograph of a tree. Notice how the branches vary in angle. The older branches being longer and heavier and more horizontal, and fresher, newer branches being more upright. To help me follow this pattern, I do a few layout trunks and branches, a few slightly more upright ones, some slightly more angled ones, and some more horizontal ones lower down. And this should be a top tip. Lay out the shape of your tree because, well, they have a tendency to get away from us sometimes. And before you know it, they're either top heavy or not enough branches or too much on one side and not enough on the other. I'll add a little touch of highlight and shadow to the undersides of some of the bigger branches, just so they fit nicely into the tree trunk. I want to add a little blue snow to the left side of this tree, down in the shadow side. Use a light touch and just drag the brush and let the canvas take what it wants for texture. Let's fix this part of my painting. It's been bothering me since I did it. That tree is just too big and heavy. No matter what I do, it's just too dark. So I've gone back to my delicate light highlighting brush. Some yellows and some little touches of white here and there. I just want to re-highlight it. Make it all together a lot lighter. A less sort of heavy shape. Here you see, it looks like it's much more part of the background. One more thing, I want to give it a little more structure. I want to add a small silver birch tree to it. Give this big tree a friend and they can wave at each other across the snow. Once again, notice the shape. Tall upright branches at the top and more horizontal branches at the bottom. But there's one more little detail I want to add. It's a touch of snow to the branches. Now here's a neat little trick. If any of your branches get a little on the heavy side, put a touch of snow on them. It'll make the branches look more realistic, especially in those little V's. That's where a little blob of snow will build up. Blue dabs to the left, maybe a little brighter white and yellow mixture for the right hand side. You'll also notice I did the same for my little background tree. There. Time to make my painting pop. All along I had planned to put in a bright shaft of light coming from that right hand side across the snow, lighting up my tree. I planned this before the painting was even begun. I knew exactly what I wanted, and it's sort of knowing what you want before you start the painting that makes a big difference. Going in sort of with half an idea, as we know, tends to result in, well, a half-finished painting. So next time you're planning out a painting, think about what you want as a feature, as a highlight. I want to add a few little frozen grasses to this foreground area. Once again, adding fine detail close to in a painting really enhances the quality of your work. On the right hand side, I'm using nice bright yellowy grassy stems here, and on the left hand side I'll be using a slightly more blue tone. Remember, things to the left are in shadow. And as you see, sometimes I use my liner brush and sometimes you use a palette knife. For the seed heads though, I'm going to be using my liner brush. Dipped into some of that bright yellowy gold paint, just touched to the top of these stems. I want to add a few contours to my snow by using some of that lovely lavender blue colour here and there, just behind where you think the snow has ramped itself up to a little bank. Now, I mentioned earlier that I was going to make a feature of this little background tree. I dry clean my filbert brush and put some of that lovely golden yellow colour on it. and added a strong side highlight to my tree and gave him a little golden carpet to sit on. But mind those twigs and branches on the little tree on the right. This draws your eye into the distance. And with that, my painting inspired by Bob's Reflections of Gold is complete. I even added a couple of birds.
So there we have it, a finished painting. But what's the big secret? The big secret is never to reveal what you don't like about your painting to anyone. When you show someone a painting and you're tempted to say, yes, but I don't like this bit, I don't like that bit, you're taking away the other person's pleasure. They love everything about your painting, and to be honest, they don't care what you don't like because they don't see it. If you start telling people what's wrong with your painting, then you sort of take away some of that pleasure that they're going to experience by looking at your work. Whereas still they may feel obliged to agree with you. And that can only end up one way, that you end up both hating the painting. And then you might end up actually not liking the person either. So, when you have something about your painting you don't like, keep it to yourself. Don't spoil it for anyone. So the secret's out. That little piece of tree over there wasn't my favourite, but I didn't tell you about that until now. If you've enjoyed this video, stick around. There's some more great videos coming along. And I hope you'll find things in those paintings that you like. And if there are things that I don't like, I won't tell you. Happy painting, people.